If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com.
At Blinds.com, it's not just about window treatments. It's about you, your style, your space, your way. Whether you DIY or want the pros to handle it all, you'll have the confidence of knowing it's done right. From free expert design help to our 100% satisfaction guarantee, everything we do is made to fit your life and your windows. Because at Blinds.com, the only thing we treat better than windows is you. Black Friday deals are going on all month long. Shop up to 45% off with minimum purchase, plus a free professional measure right now at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions apply.
The left versus the right.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Good afternoon, everybody. Right in the middle of your weekend, the best part of the weekend comes on the air. It's the left versus the right with yours truly, David Paterson, and my great friend, James Flippin, who I understand is going to take a little time off.
Yeah.
James, we might not see you next week.
That's right, Governor Paterson. I will not be the one that's here in the chair for the following weekend's program because I am actually headed to the Southern Hemisphere. I am going down to Argentina.
Wow.
You can also check out Brazil briefly. But yeah, it'll be Buenos Aires in Argentina, and then also the Mendoza region, which is where the wine, the Malbec, and the steak, and also then Rio to close it out. Check that out. Check out Brazil and see the concrete Christ as well there in Rio.
Well, that is extra special. So
I'll be able to tell you all about it when we get back.
We bid you a great trip.
And also the home of Javier Milei, who we love so much, the president of Argentina. You know, as the representative of the right on this program, I feel that I must say I truly do appreciate the work that Javier Milei is doing down there in Argentina.
Well, he has certainly made a name for himself and is pretty exciting. He's right in the middle of everything these days. So that's pretty good. Now, meanwhile, James had another distinction. Last Wednesday night into Thursday morning, James took a train down to Washington, and he was able to end the government shutdown. It's shut down. And, the aftermath, everyone blaming everyone else. But this was an interesting shutdown. It turned me off, frankly, James, because you've got to find a way to bring issues to a close. You just can't keep going on and on. We're not going to vote for this because you didn't give us that. And though President Trump called it extortion, which I think was a little bit of that was going a little far because he was not having a problem with the government shutdown when the Republicans did it. But in the end, if we're on the right track, there's got to be Now, when I was in the legislature, we didn't have shutdowns, but what would happen is if we didn't pass the budget, we couldn't leave. And we also couldn't get paid. So when that law went into effect, I believe under Governor Pataki in 2004, we got things done a lot quicker.
Yeah, funny how money is the ultimate motivator, I guess so. Pretty much anybody, because the members of Congress, to your point, Governor, they continue to get paid regardless of what goes on with the so-called government shutdown. I wouldn't necessarily agree with you, Governor, that it was too harsh a word to say extortion, because when you really think about it, what the Democrat Party has become now, apart from also being a haven for socialists and communists, is in essence a group of people who will stomp their feet and refuse to play ball if things aren't going the way that they want. For example, right? President Trump, despite the attempts with January 6th and all these other things, the Russiagate conspiracy, all these different attempts to smear him and make him out to be a criminal in his ascension to the White House 2.0, they tried to put him in jail again. They tried to basically say, the money you paid to some washed up porn stars so that you wouldn't try to blow up your marriage, or the money evaluations for your buildings in New York City. All of this amounts to you not being able to run for office. That's what we're going to do. We're going to bar you from running for office, and that's how we're going to beat you. We're going to stop you that way. So in this case, the Democrats said, well, we love Barack Obama. He's basically our party's Jesus. So for us to save his chief achievement, quote unquote, Obamacare, we're going to have to shut this whole thing down. And maybe by doing so, we can extort the Republican lawmakers into extending a program that has ruined the state of healthcare in this country in terms of the cost of premiums and all this kind of stuff. Let's go that route rather than actually negotiating some sort of change or adopting a new policy or whatever it may be. So I think the way the Democrats work nowadays, this is pretty much par for the course. But they got the voter boost from the government shutdown in Northern Virginia and maybe even parts of New Jersey as a result of the government shutdown. They got the voter boost. They won on Election Day. And then they said, oh, wow, great. We can open the government now. Isn't that nice?
And it didn't exactly happen that way. Took a little more time. But what I will say is I agree with you about the Obamacare part of this discussion, that they wanted to extend the Obamacare for a year, right? I don't think Obamacare was such a big boom to the society and such a great saver of health and that kind of thing for that to be the issue that you're laying out for, that you're going to stay with that issue come hell or high water. I don't agree with that.
Well, the one thing I'll say, though, is that where I think Democrats were effective in this game and playing this game, I heard Bill O'Reilly talking about this on these airwaves the other day. Obamacare has a lot of name recognition. It's something that people will sort of pay attention to in the news where they otherwise might not have. So for Democrats to sort of being able to tie the shutdown to Obamacare, which effectively we know it kind of was, that's a good PR plan, because the concept then becomes big bad Republicans fighting against the little person's health care. Oh, they don't care about the sick and the poor and all this kind of thing. So it's sort of that similar plan that we've heard for a while. Because in reality, I think it was more just about shutting the government down, period. They wanted that chaos. They wanted that negativity. They thought it was an albatross that could hang around Trump's neck at a time when most of the stuff the Democrats are sort of pushing for aren't really popular.
Well said. Now, what do you think about this? I believe that the health care incentives as they stand right now are going to be a problem in the 2026 midterms. In other words, I think those prices are going to go up, where most people are saying that they'll go down. And I think that what the Republicans would have to do, if they would even suffer a piece of advice from a Democrat, is to find a way to combat that, because that could be a really big issue in the next major election.
It's a good point. I think that the concept of people voting with their wallets is well established. The run-up of inflation during the Biden White House clearly made an impact in the election of President Trump. I think that we saw it here in New York City, where the support that Zohran Mamdani is able to gain, leaving aside all the other kind of, special woke stuff, ties back to affordability. I can save you on rent. I can save you on the bus pass. I can save you on this. All of that stuff is a very powerful motivator in the world of politics. I just don't know. Sometimes I get a little bit bemused, Governor, when we as commentators or people that watch this stuff say, this is going to be a big problem with the next midterms, or this is going to be, because inevitably it kind of always is. Whoever's in power is going to be blamed for the longstanding issues. So yeah, healthcare continues to be a very expensive thing. We deliver it at a pretty high quality in the United States, but it can cost an arm and a leg, no pun intended. And people have to have employment, in essence, to have really good insurance. So if they're self-employed or they own a business, it's going to cost them a lot of money. So I don't know if there's going to be a way to sort of like push through some sort of sweeping Medicare reform package or something with Medicaid, because we know that the states have been, really impacted by the way the big, beautiful bill changed the run out of the matching costs and all that kind of thing. So maybe there is something there. I mean, it seems to me like when you had a shutdown of 40 plus days, the concept of getting legislation or something done in 6 months seems kind of impossible, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's a negative way of looking at it. I certainly don't have a high level of optimism, I guess, that the Republicans can work with the Democrats to actually figure something out that would be tantamount to meaningful legislation on the healthcare side.
When we were on last week, and I think when we were on last week, both of us were still kind of reeling from the results of the election. Mm-hmm. We did talk about the new mayor, and I'm wondering what you think about this interesting move that he made. This was, I believe, last Tuesday, when he decided to pick Dean Fullahan to be his first deputy mayor. Now, just so you know, Dean Fullahan was the budget director for the New York State Assembly under the late Speaker Sheldon Silver. Mm-hmm. And he was a whiz at, negotiation and finding the issues that would be preferable to go in the budget, and at times the ones that shouldn't make the budget. I think everybody respected him. I know that the majority leader of the Senate, Joe Bruno, respected him, and I, when I was governor, respected him. And here he is in this situation, which I found surprising. But what I would say about it is, I'm wondering how this will go over with the mayor-elect's friends, because Fullahan was a very institutional guy. Now, the one thing I will say before... Like
establishment, you mean, in essence.
Exactly.
Okay.
And, but what is interesting about it is that it was what I sort of suggested last week, that if he pulled back a little bit, people might give him a little bit of a break, because he certainly was not getting one after the election last week. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, what do you think about him kind of taking a little step back and putting some people in government who actually know how to run it?
Well, look, I think that there's a lot of hope from people who are kind of licking their wounds right now, and they are right of center, or maybe just not super left of center, saying, wow, is this going to be the real thing from Mamdani? Are we really truly charging headfirst into socialism? Is he going to privatize the means of production? And, you've heard a lot about this new plan that Mamdani has, where if the city determines that building owners aren't making the right repairs to some of these residential buildings, that in essence the city can take them over and more or less seize that property as a result of those repairs not being made. And then you do that in combination
with... Now, if I closed my eyes... I'm sorry if you're interrupting, but...
No.
If I close my eyes... In fact, I think I'll close my eyes and think about what you just said. I would have thought you were talking about Trump. In other words... If they can't
fix it, in terms of the authoritarian nature of it or whatever.
If they can't fix it, I'll come in and fix it.
Yeah, I mean, and look,
here's Mamdani, who would probably be shocked if he ever saw this or listened to this show and heard that
he was being compared
to Trump.
Well, I mean, the difference is, I would say, that when you have the strict duty of the federal government in terms of I don't know what you're going to compare it to, maybe the deploying of the National Guard, let's say.
Right.
Places that have obfuscated their duty in terms of responding to violent crime. And then you have the federal government putting resources in place or telling Amtrak that they're going to take over the repair of Penn Station or whatever. These are still involving public resources, public property, things that fall under the purview of government management. The idea of a privately owned residential building falling under the hands of New York City government because repairs aren't being made, when you're already telling these landlords that there's an artificial cap at how much they can charge, right? If it's a rent stabilized building, right, you're artificially capped at how much money you can charge. A lot of these landlords can't make the repairs to these buildings because they're not getting enough disposable income from the property to be able to do so. So this is a self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of taking over the housing stock of the city, taking over the means of production, seizing private property. So I guess there's parts of a Dean Fullahan who maybe that puts me a little bit at ease, right? You're working with somebody who understands more the means of production. Now, is he a guy who is also connected with de Blasio, Fullahan? Because I know there was somebody brought into Mamdani's transition team who was more or less the guy that kind of rubber stamped all the crazy spending plans that de Blasio had.
I think he was involved with the transition team. I don't think he actually worked for him. Now, I could be corrected, and but in this situation, it looks like he's going to be around full time.
And so I would say, look, the reality is that Mamdani's going to have to adjust some of his agenda unless there's an aspect of this or a factor that's unforeseen and that I can't really firmly make sense of right now. What would that be? Something like New York City inventing a new cryptocurrency that's going to go wild, and then the coffers of the city will be flush with cash, and you can run all these special utopian programs, and everything will be fine because money grows on trees. Literally.
Sounds fine to me.
That would be one option. The other option is that the city doesn't have the money to do all this stuff. The state of New York doesn't have all the money to accomplish this. And you also have an increasing number of the tax base that are fleeing the hostile environment for other places like Florida, Virginia, the Carolinas. So in terms of a Fullahan being a guy who can more realistically break down the options and what could be achieved, what can't be achieved, that's probably a good sign, because I think most people would say that if Mamdani's going to be a success, he's going to have to pull back a little bit, the term you used,
right,
and go to the center and figure out a way to really prioritize what he figures is most important, or what the DSA figures is most important, or whatever. And naturally, that's going to enrage or anger or disappoint some of his supporters because they want all of it right away. But we're already seeing that issue with Jessica Tisch. And supposedly there's going to be a meeting with Jessica Tisch and Zohran Mamdani, or they already had the meeting or whatever. And if Tisch stays in place as NYPD commissioner, that could go a long way towards solidifying the early part of the Mamdani administration.
Absolutely.
Because he already has all this criticism in his back pocket. You hate the NYPD. You said they were racist. You came out against them during the George Floyd stuff. If a solid, politically connected individual like Tisch stays in place as NYPD commissioner, it could go a long way towards boosting the early part of the Mamdani team.
So let's look at the flip side of that, which I think we got into a little bit last week. So, all right, Mamdani comes in. He gets an institutional player to be part of his administration. He gets a few people that really, you could safely say represent the establishment to be in his administration. He moves forward, and he's going to keep Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch. Mm-hmm. And then, but the question is, I am sure that his comrades, remember de Blasio called the Democratic candidates comrades one night? Yes. His comrades may not like this, that their view is more about destruction and not about improving quality of life. Mm-hmm. And do you think it's possible that they might start to publicly castigate him? Because all you got to do when you're a socialist is take one step to the right after you took 100 steps to the left, and people might not like it.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think that it's certainly possible that you have the far left flank continuing to criticize almost anything that someone's going to do that strays from the really, truly dyed-in-the-wool, progressive, Marxist, communist agenda. And Mamdani's going to have to make a decision. Does he want to be a continuous hero to the left and someone who went down in a ball of flames as they tried to drag the city kicking and screaming into some sort of Soviet gulag, well, that's his choice. But if he wants to be a two-term mayor, and if he wants to be a person who can successfully parlay this into a run for president or whatever it may be, he is going to have to actually govern towards the city's best interests. And clearly the concept of destroying the NYPD would not be in the city's best interests. He can make tweaks. He can try to bring on these mental health teams that he thinks are going to be super successful in terms of going out and calling certain domestic violence situations, whatever. But if he's going to bring in someone and then try to totally dismantle the NYPD and all that they stand for, he will be a one-term mayor. So I think that that's where he's going to have to stiff arm some of that stuff from the DSA. And I predict he will. Wow.
Well, he might be going beyond a one-term mayor, but we can't go beyond our time here because we have some commercial messages that need to be heard, some business to take care of. So we just thank you for listening to this portion of The Left versus the Right. I'm David Paterson. I'm with James Flippin. We'll be back right after this.
The Left versus the Right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy.
Download and subscribe
at BeBullish.com. The Left versus the Right.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back on The Left versus the Right with James Flippin, who is a closet lefty, but he plays the right very well. No, he is a strong, thoughtful conservative. It's great to have thoughtful conservatives.
Well, can I just stop you right there? And I want to say thank you very much for saying that, Governor Paterson, because I think it's also appreciated from the right, the fact that you're someone who is a thoughtful Democrat, thoughtful liberal, to the extent that we use that term. And I just want to say quickly, I caught some guff in the newsroom recently because there was some story that came out. This is just to show you that I'm not always thoughtful. Okay, yeah. This is just to disavow the notion that I'm actually some truly thoughtful, feeling person on the right. I want to beef up my better standing because there was a story that came out about an animal shelter in Newark, New Jersey, that as a result of the shutdown had all these people, so they say, turning their pets in. And they can't afford their pets because they're not getting their food stamp benefits. And, oh my gosh, we're going to have to kill these 10 dogs if you won't come and adopt the dogs because... And I said, okay, well, but wait a second. As somebody who's an animal lover and someone who loves dogs, loves cats, this is something that these shelters deal with all the time, sadly. I mean, it's a heartbreaking concept.
Yeah.
But they all the time have too many animals in their care, and they're desperately hoping that someone in the surrounding community can come and help them out, adopt some of the animals. So when I read this, I said, well, wait a second. You're telling me that people, because they didn't have access to food stamps for like a week and a half, are turning in their beloved dogs and cats and saying we can't possibly feed? Please. Stop. Okay. Anybody who loves their dog, loves their cat, they would go down to the 99-cent store, grab a can of tuna, give the cat or dog food for a day, and call it a day. Okay. The dog's going to be fine without its blue bonnet, whatever it is, meal for the week. So I call fake news on that. I just want to say that you don't accuse me of being too feeling and, thoughtful. That's total fake news. That animal shelter, I'm sure, struggles with this all the time. And that's horrible that they have to try to find people to constantly adopt these. But to connect it to the government shutdown and try to suggest like it's Trump's fault that they're killing these dogs and cats was such a classic play from these various fake news organizations that I just had to call it out. That's all.
And James, since I agree with you, I want to ask you this.
Okay.
What's the over-under of $50,000 that was given to the animal shelter.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
So anyway, as we move forward, Jeffrey Epstein just continues to be in the news. And he was in the news, I believe it was Thursday morning, when they were trying to say that he had written some emails in which he had indicated that Donald Trump had spent time at his place. And I think there was one in the emails that he knew about the girls. Now, I don't know that any of this is true, but this is the problem when there's some kind of explanation of a situation such as like this. Obviously the White House wanted to debunk it, and so did the president. But it did at least bring back the notion, and this has nothing to do with President Trump, that there were a lot of really terrible things that happened to a lot of those women during that time. And some of them got through it, but some of them did not. And it's just, it's like something that never goes away.
Yeah, well, exactly.
When is he going to go away?
Well, that's the
He's
thing.
supposed to be dead.
Well, what does that
how's he
mean?
still sending emails out?
Yeah, so what does that mean even? Let's just take it at face value that this is an actual email, that there's electronic records of it, so that can't be discredited or whatever. What does that even mean, that he knows about the girls? In other words, the story that's been out there for many years is that Trump actually barred Epstein from his Mar-a-Lago club because of what he had heard about Epstein being creepy, getting massages from girls who might well be underage.
Now,
so for him to say he knows about the girls, that can mean any number of things. That can mean him saying he knows that I'm a creep and this isn't going to work out anymore. And let's watch out for Donald.
And just for full disclosure, I heard that in 2014. I was at Mar-a-Lago. A friend of mine lived next door. We were over there for dinner, and in the dinner conversation, somebody brought that up, that this was happening. It was actually the first time I ever heard of Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, I must have known from the case that he had in Florida, right? And how they kind of
like you read about it or heard of that whole situation.
But I didn't know really anything about. I didn't know anything about that.
Sure.
Now, what I thought was, this is totally away from what we're talking about, but I had dinner in Mar-a-Lago on New Year's Eve, 2014, and I was with my friends who lived next door to President Trump, and he comes in. This, of course, is before he runs for president. He comes in, he says, "David, how you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm fine. How are you?" He said, "Why don't you come to my New Year's party tomorrow?" So I look at the people around the table, and if they tried to give expressions back, I couldn't read them. But I tried to look for help. No one says anything. So I said, I can't say no. I'm in his place. Yeah, okay, I'll come. And he says, great. Starts 7:00 tomorrow. Walks away. And my friend turns to me and says, "Good job, David. You just made $3,200 for President Trump's club." I said, "How did I raise $3,200?" He says, "There are 8 of us. He charges $400 a person. Last time I checked, 8 times 34."
You couldn't read their facial expressions, Governor.
No,
it's
exactly.
not your fault. You didn't know.
8 times 400 is 3,200. And wow. I said, okay.
Well,
because
you know what? That's the art of the deal. He closed the deal right there.
It's the art of the deal and the art of quick thinking. He is a master.
Yes.
Quick thinker.
Yes. But look, I think that this is the thing. We started at the beginning of the show, we said, or at least I did, the concept of the government shutdown and tying it to Obamacare is a way in which the Democrats know they can effectively blunt the momentum of the Trump administration. A shutdown, major headlines grabber, takes a lot of the oxygen from the news. In and of itself, it's a news story that's going to be sort of negative to the administration at hand. The fact that you can tie it into Obamacare, even more so. It's a highly public known issue. Obama himself, a popular president, that sort of thing. The Epstein thing is that all over again, and it continues to happen here in the second Trump administration. I just want to say to anybody who might be listening, who is of a more left-leaning persuasion, is it not extremely ham-fisted, this concept of just continuously saying, Trump and Epstein and Trump? No one is going for that, guys. You had 4 years, and even longer than that, because it was during the Trump administration 1.0 when Epstein was arrested and then he died in custody. Some say he killed himself. Some say it was something else, whatever. But you had all this time to try to pin Trump on something connected to Epstein, and it didn't happen. You had the entirety of Biden's term where he was grabbing girls close and sniffing their hair when you could have pinned Epstein on Trump. Didn't happen. It's never going to happen because it's not real. It's a fake. It's always been a fake. And whatever did or didn't happen with Epstein, obviously Trump was not a part of that, or else at this point he would have been finished, because this is a guy who has been more scrutinized than probably any president in U.S. history.
And I think I actually the other day watched the documentary.
Oh, that's right. You were saying that.
Yeah, which was actually very good. And it did not.
And what was that, a documentary on, like, the rise of Epstein, like how he made his money or whatever?
It was how he made his money.
Okay.
Then how he got his different places that he hung out, and then how he would get the women to come over thinking that they were they were interviewing to be a massage therapist, and they were actually interviewing to get molested by him.
Right.
And but there wasn't any real mention of Trump. His name came up, but there was no accusation, which I thought was fair. But Bill Clinton's name came up, and in his case, there were pictures, which was kind of interesting. Now, the women said that he did not involve himself in any of that activity. On one hand, I could see that, because when there's that kind of activity and you're well known, you really don't want to be around to even hear about it later on. In those days, things were kind of different. It was sort of like, this is a safe haven. And even though a bunch of people's lives were badly interfered with, it didn't appear to me that the high profile individuals who many would love to nail for being there, that ever happened.
It's certainly possible. I know that there have been a lot of allegations and claims made over the years about not just the Epstein thing, but what was that there was some alleged pedophile ring in, like, Nebraska or Arkansas back in the 80s.
Yeah, I think it was Nebraska.
And people say to this day that there was a whole news report on that more or less got 86'd before it was going to be effectively put out. For how long have we heard about the Hollywood stuff? And you mentioned the Epstein thing that kind of came to your attention in the 2010s. The Harvey Weinstein story was public knowledge, more or less. It was the worst kept secret in Hollywood that he was supposedly involved in some of that casting couch stuff. And in essence, that sort of was overlooked because, as you noted, sort of just the way things were done or whatever. But the Clinton one is kind of interesting because he's a guy, and for all the reputation that Donald Trump has of supposedly being a dog or bad about women or whatever, the whole grab them by the in the first part of his early campaign, that stuff, whatever, put that up on a shelf. Bill Clinton, from what we understand, actually did engage in relations at the White House with a staffer, intern, How old was Monica Lewinsky at the time? Something like
18,
19 or whatever. So that's a major power dynamic kind of violation, workplace violation, the kind of things that we think about nowadays. But I'm just saying that it's certainly not such a leap that if Clinton's got a thing for a 19-year-old intern, is that such a leap then that he was doing this, that, the other? Again, I'd just like to say I'd like to apologize. I'd like to disavow myself of any actual clear allegations. I'm purely making speculation here. But yeah, I just think that the whole Epstein issue, people want to use it like a cudgel for whatever it is that they want to accomplish. And the real sad thing is, Governor Paterson, as you very astutely said, women were abused in this whole thing. Women were taken advantage of and victimized. And yet all we can do here 25 years later is try to make it into a way to take down Trump. That's sad. And it's also kind of sad for both sides, because anybody who's fair, who's compassionate, who wants the universe to ring true, you want people to get in trouble for doing bad stuff like that. And in essence, it does feel like, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's Nebraska, whether it's Epstein Island, whatever, there is a ability to get away with some of these crimes, depending on how influential you are, if you know the right people, how much money you have. Of course, that's kind of been going on for time immemorial. But at the same time, when it's continuing to come up in the news cycle from places like CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times and whatever, because they want to take down Trump, it makes you almost increasingly skeptical.
Yes. And that's, I think, what's driven the whole Epstein phenomenon. And even, his emails and material that's come up since he passed away. While I was watching the documentary, I kept thinking, when is he going to go away? Just go away. Now, I knew eventually that he committed suicide, and they're trying to say it wasn't a suicide. Mm-hmm. But it's just kind of amazing to know if 10 years ago somebody told us, here's a little, we'll give you a little up close view of what the next 10 years are going to be like. I think I would have to check myself into a facility, because stuff you just wouldn't imagine.
Is COVID included in that?
Yeah, COVID's in there too.
Yeah,
COVID's in there too.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that there's no question about it that the way in which the internet has changed things, 24/7 cable news, you go back to the era of Bill Clinton and how things have changed, the level of scrutiny, I think in some ways it's a good thing. I think that the transparency that comes with the internet sleuths and the ability to kind of dig into the past record, it's a positive in a lot of ways. Has it also polarize some of these differences between us that we focus on here on the left versus the right? Yeah, I think that's also fair to say. But I know we got to grab a break here in a second, Governor Paterson, but I wanted to ask you, and maybe we do it on the other side, if you have any thoughts on the revelations about the housing market this past week, and also the idea of a 50-year mortgage. Because I think it's worthwhile. It's kind of causing some disagreement even amongst people within the MAGA movement. So it's probably an interesting thing that we could get your perspective on.
Well, we'll do that right after we come back. I have to check with AI, but while we're hearing a commercial and taking care of some business, he's James Flippin. I'm David Paterson. He's going to south of the equator next week. That's right.
It's late springtime there, Governor. So while everybody's freezing their tuchus off here, I'll be wearing shorts.
Maybe I'll fly down,
I'm going to get you in.
We'll be back.
You'll be a stowaway.
Yeah, right after this.
The left versus the right on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
The left versus the right.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're with James Flippin, And this is maybe a little different than how our sessions go, but I would like to point out to my colleague, I'm not very familiar with the 50-year mortgage. So that informs me that at least half this audience is right where I am. Mm-hmm. So would you like to be Professor Flippin and
for sure
teach a little bit here for a minute?
Let's do it. I mean, look, the reality of the housing market is that increasingly younger people are not able to buy a home.
Right. I knew that.
The increased property taxes for this part of the world, the high cost of living to begin with, and how much your paycheck goes toward just other things aside from housing. Interest rates are elevated compared to where they were 10 years ago. And despite all the programs that are out there to try to help, let's say, first-time home buyers, you got to come up with a down payment some way and some form. The concept of a 50-year mortgage is where most typically the amortization schedule would be based on a 30-year structure. So
right.
By the end of that 30-year term, you will have paid off your loan. And sometimes it's done a little bit differently, especially in like the commercial real estate market where you might owe a big payment somewhere down the line. They call that a balloon payment. And you just have time with which to make it up and you then owe it. The 30-year mortgage is pretty standard. And it's the idea that if you buy it now, 30 years from now, the home will be paid off. You're not going to owe the bank or the lender anymore. You'll owe it free and clear, as they say. And
but you will have paid a lot of money.
You'll be paying a lot of money. In the meantime, honestly, the interest is what it comes down to when you think about the fact that you're stretching it out over 30 years. 50-year mortgage, take that same concept, but you're going to have paid it off in full 50 years from now. The National Association of Realtors. Oh, that should
be real easy for me.
The National Association of Realtors came out with a study this past week saying that, yes, at this point, the average first-time home buyer, the average age of a first-time home buyer is over 40 in the United States. And a lot of people are saying, whoa, that's kind of striking considering the fact that people are getting their families started and obviously need a place to live, would benefit from the ability to have equity growth and paying themselves as a landlord as opposed to just paying rent to their landlord. Because yes, the interest, you're never going to get that back. In other words, you do pay money to borrow the money. There's a fee there, but at least it avails you the chance to own your own piece of property. And what does that term really mean, right? Governor, own. That's what gets a little bit sticky when you have the partner in the mortgage holder, whether it's a credit union, a bank, a national organization that does that kind of home buying lending. Right. It's a little bit sticky. Like, what does it really mean to own a home? If you have a massive mortgage on it, do you own it? Well, technically, yes, you're the deed holder. You arranged for some financing. Anything could happen where it doesn't go that way or it doesn't go well, but that's also true of starting a business. It's also true of buying a car. It's also true of so many different things we do in life. The relationship we have with debt is part and parcel to that. So the idea that President Trump is putting out there is maybe we can structure a program, create a new product where it's a 50-year note as opposed to a 30-year note. Some people within the MAGA movement,
I was going to ask about that because so far it sounds quite acceptable to me.
The issue I think that some people have in the so-called MAGA movement is they see that as President Trump siding with the big banks, siding with the lending agencies, not necessarily siding with the American people, but the business interests that so often are kind of tied to the GOP, the Republican Party, right? The powerful and wealthy kingmakers that a politician needs to keep happy, whatever. And the argument being, oh, wow, you're giving us 20 more years to pay interest to the bank. Oh, wow, you're really giving us a chance to just keep these banks in business. But to me, that's where the populism movement kind of loses me a little bit, Governor Paterson, because I have an appreciation for the everyday worker, the American middle-class family who's struggling to get by, and they feel the weight of corporate America with the boot on their neck and all that. That's where you have some of that meeting together of the left and the right on issues of populism. But for me, I see an upside in being able to buy that property, even if it has to be through a lending organization, even if it means that I'm buying it at 30 and it's going to take me until I'm 80 years to pay off. I may not even live that long. But the point is the concept of growing equity, owning a piece of property, you subtract from the debt over time, the growth of the property hopefully grows, the value of the property, I should say. And in essence, over time, that equation starts to work with you. It's more of the same, in my opinion, Governor Paterson. I'd be really curious to get your take on it. When we live in an instant gratification society, someone's saying to you, well, here's a way. This is a little creative. We can change things a little bit and make it so that you could actually own a home, but the concept of owning it free and clear is a little bit further away.
Right.
Hey, if you have the cash to buy the property, that's what you should do, because in essence, you're not going to have to pay any. Well, actually, we could argue and say, no, that's not even the best way, because you might as well put some of that cash into the S&P 500 and still have a mortgage on your property. So there's no one-size-fits-all approach to finance.
Right.
And it's such a under-discussed, under-taught concept in this country, finance, saving, personal finances, that I think there's a natural knee-jerk reaction to say, whoa, you're trying to help the big rich banks just get more rich off me. Well, no, we're trying to put the concept of home ownership into more people's portfolio.
You've been listening to Professor James Flippin, whose book, Rich Like Me, will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. If you'd like to get one of the early copies, please send $200 and 3 blank checks to The Left versus the Right.
Absolutely.
Right here on WABC.
Yes, we can use it.
The most honest station you've ever listened to.
100%.
So in our a few moments here, how many
What do you think? I mean, do you think that that's in essence a cop-out by somebody like me, who is a populist and does support President Trump? Like, do you think that there's more chance for victimhood or rather exploitation amongst lending agencies, if you were to say that's an option?
Because the lending period lasts so long, a whole lot of things can happen that you're not anticipating. And I don't blame the home buyer for being suspicious of it. But what I would say, I always tried to pay for everything and not have to pay any more.
Right. So
the one house I did buy, I paid the whole thing. But now I put myself on a mortgage, because I was paying back the loan.
Yeah.
But I don't think that what the president's trying to do is such a bad idea. I'm a little surprised that some of his most ardent followers connected that to a kind of populist criticism that you would have expected from the left.
Well, the thing that's going on right now, I think, for the far right, let's say, because it's probably increasingly inaccurate to even say the so-called MAGA movement. People who don't really understand that there is nuance within the entire political spectrum just want to be able to say red and blue. That's all I know, and that's all I want to understand. But there's a lot of nuance even within all that. So, for example, I think of some of the people that I know and talk politics with. This has been sort of the discussion that we've been having, Governor Paterson, over the last couple of weeks. How much of a percentage should be ascribed to people's culture, mentality, priorities, work ethic, all of that when it comes to their personal finances and their successes from a financer perspective? And then what percentage should be ascribed to conditions?
Right.
So unfairness, lack of competition, the difficulty with getting a good education, the high capital costs that it takes to get into some of these positions. What's the percentage? In some people's mind, it might be 50-50. It might be, well, you got to really work hard. You got to prioritize saving. You got to prioritize saving for retirement. You got to prioritize your family. You don't want to necessarily spend money on that car. You don't necessarily need that suit. You don't necessarily need to go on that second vacation, whatever. The 50-50 thing is probably not real, but, a person like Zohran Mamdani would say, actually, it's about 90% economic conditions that make people get screwed over and about 10% mentality. 10% in you could work a little bit harder and prioritize things better and plan things better. I would actually say the opposite. I would say it's probably close to like 80% mentality and ethic and prioritization and planning and having your head on straight when it comes to things, and about 20% the economic condition. So anybody at the end of the day could argue what that percentage is, but everybody would probably agree it's some combination of your behavior, your focus level, your culture, and your standards, and also the conditions that you find yourself in when it comes to economics, market, whatever.
And I think one of the problems that people, when they buy homes and they have this kind of a mortgage, is they're trying to keep up with the mortgage payments, and then all of a sudden their children start going to college.
Right.
And then they're getting buried. And in many situations that I noticed growing up in Long Island, the people just sold the houses and moved.
Right.
They moved to an easier place to forestall having economic issues right in the home.
Yeah. I mean, there's clearly so much of this is high level, complicated, no easy answer. The need to save for your kids' college is up there with the need to save for retirement. And it's not easy, right? I'm not going to sit here from a position of relative financial privilege and try to just tell people that you need to just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's kind of my point, is that there is some percentage within which all this falls. And there's some percentage within which that person maybe could have put more money into their 529 college plan or whatever, or put more money into that particular saving or whatever. Maybe they couldn't. Everybody's situation is different. But my point is to say that it'd be remiss from someone like me on the right to just openly suggest, yeah, you're right. Nobody can succeed anymore. Everybody's screwed. There is no such thing as the American dream. It's totally done. Are there aspects of things that I think I could agree with and take exception with, whether it's some combination of immigration or the cultural shift away from families and single income families and how that's raised income levels, but also inflation and all that. Yeah, it's not an easy solution. I was in here some months, if not years ago, with Paul Stone talking about how moving off the gold standard has led to more hard investment in real estate because people aren't as interested in investing in gold as a byproduct of that. So it's all part of the equation. What's the percentage? That's where I think it gets a little complicated and where people on the left and the right sort of disagree between, say, economic condition versus someone's personal motivation.
Right. Well, it could not have been covered any better than you just did. That's really quite an effort on your part.
Tell Larry Kudlow the next time you see him.
I'll tell him about that.
I'm up to snuff when it comes to his
So as we come up to the end of the program, James, I want you to know that we have gotten a second commendation, a second shout out from the gentleman who will follow us, John Sterling, who'll be on at 4:00. I happened to listen to our show last week, and about 10 after 3, he says, by the way, I drive in, he talks about the highways he drives through. I like to get here early because I want to be relaxed. And when I get here early, I hear the show, The Left and the Right. And he included both of us and admonished the audience that they should listen in. So thank you all, and John Sterling, who will get a finder's fee.
Absolutely.
For having us on today.
And we got to give him a little alley-oop as well to say, hey, hang through the switchover from this show and getting through the news and going into the next program, because who better to listen to talk about sports than John Sterling in New York City on a Saturday afternoon. Plus, you just had this report come out last week, and who knows, again, it could be fake news. I'm fully willing to embrace that, where Paul Skeens, the now NL Cy Young winner, has told teammates he wants to play for the Yankees. And he doesn't believe that the Pirates are going to put a winner on the field, and he wants to go play for the Yankees. Now, look, Governor Paterson, who wouldn't want to play for the Yankees, right? If you're a baseball player, I think that goes without saying.
So he wants to go to the Yankees, but the question is, how much will the Mets pay him?
Yeah. Well, the Mets, of course, the other guy that won the Cy Young in the American League side, Tariq Skubal, supposedly the Mets are going to try to make a push to trade for him. Whether or not that actually happens, we'll see.
I've heard.
It would mean giving up a lot in the draft prospect side, but obviously worth it for a guy like him.
I think if we talk any more about sports, they won't even let John Sterling show on today. So I just want to say this one thing about John Sterling.
Yeah.
I was in college, and he had a radio program. He replaced a music host whose name was Jack Spector, and he replaced him around 1971, 1972. And I'm listening to the show one night, and we was talking about the teams and this, that, and the other thing. And then he just says, listen, I've just read something on the wire that Governor George Wallace of Alabama has been shot while campaigning in, I think it was the state of Georgia. So Sterling talks a little more for a minute. He says, listen, we can continue to talk about sports, but look, this is a major shooting of a presidential candidate. If you want to talk about that, please feel free. And some people called up and talked to him about that. And what is this coming to with our country? Martin Luther King 3 or 4 years ago. And he was brilliant. He had no idea this was coming. And he did it as you would have thought that Walter Cronkite was doing the interview.
Well,
it was that good.
That's the mark of a true professional and somebody who has the ability to kind of adjust on the fly and dip into any number of different things, especially a breaking story like that. Definitely something that deserves the commendation. And what else would you expect from John Sterling?
Absolutely. So we're going to adjust on the fly. The news is next at 4. Then John Sterling. He can give the rebuttal to what we've just said. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
I'll be dancing the tango.
That's right.
The Left versus the Right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy.
Download and subscribe
at BeBullish.com.